The mining ship Meridian's Hope drifted through the void of space like a wounded beast, its hull scarred from years of harsh labor and alien occupation. Inside the cramped corridors, human workers moved with the slow shuffle of the defeated, their faces marked by 3 generations of servitude to their reptilian masters. The Vortex ruled the ship with iron claws and cold cruelty. These towering lizard-like beings stood nearly 8 feet tall, their scales gleaming green-black under the harsh artificial lights. Their yellow eyes held no warmth, no mercy, only the calculating gaze of beings who saw humans as nothing more than useful tools. Tom Blake pressed his small face against the ventilation grate, watching the workers below as they hauled heavy ore containers through the main corridor. His father, Mark, had told him to stay hidden during the work shifts, but the 8-year-old boy was curious about the world beyond their tiny living quarters. He could see the exhaustion in every human face, the way they kept their eyes down when Vortex guards stalked past with their energy weapons humming. The boy's mother, Lisa, had died 2 years ago from the lung sickness that plagued many workers in the deep mines. Since then, Tom had spent most of his time alone while his father worked 18-hour shifts maintaining the mining equipment. Mark Blake was one of the few humans the Vortex valued, his engineering skills too useful to waste. But even he lived under constant threat. A loud crash echoed to the ship, followed by the harsh barking voices of angry Vortex. Tom scrambled back from the grate as heavy footsteps thundered past his hiding spot. Something had gone wrong in the mines again. The old drilling equipment had been failing more often lately, and the Vortex grew more violent with each breakdown. In the command center far above, Commander Theck studied the production reports with growing fury. His reptilian features twisted into a snarl as he reviewed the numbers. The mining quotas had fallen short for the 3rd month in a row, and his superiors in the Vortex Empire were demanding answers. Failure meant death, and Theck had no intention of dying for these worthless human slaves. The commander's aide, a smaller Vortex named Grix, approached with nervous steps. "Sir, the chief engineer reports another drill failure in Sector 7. The humans claim the equipment is too old to maintain proper function." Theck's claws scraped against the metal desk, leaving deep gouges. "These pathetic creatures make excuses while my reputation suffers. Perhaps they need a reminder of their place in the natural order. What would you have us do, Commander?" "Summon the human leaders. It is time they paid proper tribute to Skaroth, the Warbringer. Their god of metal and circuits has failed them. Perhaps they will work harder, knowing that Skaroth hungers for flesh." Within an hour, the ship's human population had been herded into the main cargo bay. Families held together in fear while Vortex guards stood at every exit, their weapons ready. Tom found himself squeezed between his father and an older woman named Beth who worked in the food processing unit. Commander Theck emerged onto the elevated platform that overlooked the crowd. His presence commanded immediate silence. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute power. "Humans, your failures have dishonored this vessel. Your weak efforts mock the glory of the Vortex Empire." Mark Blake stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Commander, the mining equipment is beyond its operational limits. With proper replacement parts, we can increase production by 30%. Theck's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "Always excuses from your kind. Always bargaining and pleading. You forget that you exist only at our mercy." The commander gestured to his guards, and they brought forward a massive cage covered by a heavy tarp. The smell that wafted from it made several humans gag. It was the scent of death and predator musk, wild and dangerous. "Behold the sacred Ravenclaw of Skaroth," Theck announced as the tarp was pulled away. "For too long, this noble beast has been denied proper sacrifice. Today, we correct this oversight." The creature inside the cage defied easy description. It stood on 4 powerful legs, each ending in claws that could shred steel. Its body was covered in fur so dark it seemed to absorb light, and its amber eyes burned with intelligence and barely contained rage. The beast was clearly starved, its ribs visible beneath its thick coat, but even weakened it radiated lethal power. "The tribute will be chosen by sacred lot," Theck continued, producing a container filled with metal chips. "Each family will draw. The chosen household will provide sustenance for Scaratha's blessed servant." Tom felt his father's hand tighten on his shoulder as families were called forward one by one. The drawing was rigged, of course. The Vortex had already decided who would suffer, but they enjoyed the theater of false chance. When Mark Blake's name was called, Tom saw something die in his father's eyes. The engineer's hand trembled as he reached into the container. The metal chip he withdrew bore the mark of Skaroff, a stylized claw dripping with blood. Around them, other humans stepped back, grateful for their escape, but ashamed of their relief. The Blake family has been honored, Thek announced with mock ceremony. Their child will join with Scaratha's servant in sacred union. Tom looked up at his father, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing the terrible finality in the air. "Dad, what's going on?" Mark knelt down and pulled his son close, his voice breaking. "Tom, I need you to be brave now. Braver than you've ever been. Remember that you're mother, and I love you more than all the stars in space." The Vortex guards moved forward before any other words could be spoken. Their clawed hands seized Tom, despite his father's desperate protests. Mark lunged forward but was struck down by an energy weapon, his body convulsing as electricity coursed through him. "Please," Beth called out from the crowd. "Take me instead. The boy is innocent." Thek's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. "Innocence is a luxury your species cannot afford. The child goes to Skaroff." Tom was dragged toward a section of the cargo bay he had never seen before. A circular platform descended from the ceiling, revealing an opening that led into darkness below. The feeding pit, as the humans had whispered about in terrified voices for years. No one who went down there ever returned. The boy found his voice as he was lifted toward the opening. "Dad, I'm scared." But Mark Blake lay unconscious on the metal floor, blood trickling from where the energy blast had struck him. The other humans watched in horror as the child disappeared into the pit, the platform rising again to seal the opening. In the darkness below, Tom landed hard on a floor covered with old bones and rotting meat. The smell was overwhelming, and he pressed his small fist against his nose to block it out. Somewhere in the shadows, he could hear heavy breathing and the soft pad of massive paws on stone. The Ravenclaw emerged from the deeper darkness, like a nightmare given form, its amber eyes fixed on a small human who had been delivered to its domain. The beast had been starved for weeks, its last meal nothing more than scraps of rotten flesh. Now fresh prey cowered before it, young and tender. Tom looked up at the creature towering above him and felt something strange happen in his mind. Instead of screaming or running, he tilted his head and studied the beast with the same curiosity he had shown when watching the workers through the ventilation grate. The Ravenclaw paused, confused by this reaction. "You're hungry," Tom said quietly. "I can see it in your eyes. But you're not just hungry for food, are you?" The beast lowered its massive head, bringing its face close to the boy's. Tom could feel its hot breath on his skin, could see the intelligence burning behind those amber orbs. This was no mindless monster, he realized. This was a thinking being, trapped and tormented just like the humans above. "They hurt you too," Tom whispered, reaching out with one small hand toward the creature's scarred muzzle. "We're the same, you and me. We're both prisoners." The Ravenclaw's eyes widened in surprise as the boy's fingers gently touched its nose. In all its years of captivity, no one had ever shown it kindness. The Vortex had captured it as a youngling and broken its spirit through pain and starvation, turning it into their instrument of terror. But this small human was different. There was no fear in his touch, no hatred in his eyes, only understanding and a strange sort of compassion that the beast had forgotten could exist. Above them, Commander Thek addressed the assembled humans one final time. "Let this remind you of the price of failure. Work harder, or more of your children will feed the sacred beast." Scaratha's hunger is endless, and so is his servant's appetite. The humans were dismissed back to their quarters, many of them weeping for the boy they believed was already dead. Mark Blake was carried to the medical bay, his body broken but his heart shattered beyond repair. He had failed to protect his son, the last piece of his beloved Lisa that remained in the world. But far below in the feeding pit, something extraordinary was beginning. Tom sat cross-legged on the bone-strewn floor, no longer afraid of the massive predator that circled him. The Ravenclaw had not attacked, had not even bared its fangs. Instead, it lay down nearby, its great head resting on its paws as it watched the boy with growing fascination. "My name is Tom," the boy said softly. "What's yours?" The creature could not speak, But something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended words. The Vortex had intended this meeting to be an execution, but instead they had created something far more dangerous. A bond between two beings who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from each other. 3 months had passed since Tom Blake disappeared into the feeding pit, and life aboard the Meridian's Hope had grown even harsher. The Vortex worked the humans longer hours with less food, their cruelty sharpened by the belief that their sacrifice to Skaroth had been accepted. Production numbers had improved slightly, though this was more due to fear than divine favor. Mark Blake had recovered from his injuries but remained a broken man. He performed his engineering duties with mechanical precision, speaking only when spoken to and avoiding eye contact with his fellow humans. The other workers pitied him but kept their distance, afraid that association with a man who had lost a child to the beast might bring similar misfortune upon their own families. Commander Thek was pleased with the results of his brutal demonstration. The humans worked with renewed desperation, and the ship's systems ran more smoothly than they had in months. He had even received a commendation from his superiors for bringing the mining quotas back to acceptable levels. The sacrifice had served its purpose perfectly, but far below in the depths of the feeding pit, something unprecedented was taking place. Tom Blake was not only alive but thriving in ways that defied all logic. The boy had grown taller and stronger during his months in the darkness, his muscles adapting to the harsh environment with remarkable speed. The Ravenclaw, whom Tom had begun calling Shadow, had become his constant companion and protector. The massive beast shared its meager water rations with the boy and used its body heat to keep him warm during the ship's cold cycles. What had begun as mutual curiosity had deepened into genuine affection. Tom had learned to understand Shadow's complex system of growls, whines, and body language. The creature communicated through subtle ear movements, tail positions, and changes in its amber eyes that glowed softly in the pit's perpetual twilight. In return, Tom spoke to Shadow constantly, his voice the first kind words a beast had heard in decades of captivity. The boy discovered that Shadow was far more intelligent than the Vortex realized. The creature understood concepts of past and future, could solve simple problems, and even showed what Tom could only describe as a sense of humor. Sometimes Shadow would playfully knock him over with a gentle paw, then make a sound that resembled laughter when Tom pretended to be hurt. More remarkably, Tom began to sense Shadow's emotions directly. When the beast was sad, the boy felt a hollow ache in his chest. When Shadow was content, warmth spread through Tom's body like sunlight. This strange connection grew stronger each day, until Tom could sometimes anticipate Shadow's actions before the creature moved. The pit itself became their shared domain. Shadow showed Tom hidden alcoves where previous victims had dropped supplies or tools. The boy found scattered metal pieces, scraps of cloth, and even a few emergency ration packs that had fallen to the feeding slot over the years. Together, they created a small shelter in the deepest part of the pit where the Vortex never looked. Tom's body continued to change in ways that should have been impossible. His reflexes became lightning fast. His hearing grew so acute he could distinguish individual footsteps 3 levels above, and his strength increased far beyond what any 8-year-old should possess. When he gripped the metal bars of Shadow's old cage, his fingers left dents in the reinforced steel. The boy began to suspect that something in Shadow's presence was triggering these changes. When the beast breathed on him, Tom felt energy coursing through his veins like liquid fire. When they slept curled together for warmth, his dreams were filled with visions of running through vast forests under alien stars, seeing through eyes that burned with amber light. Shadow was changing too, though more subtly. The creature's movements became smoother and more purposeful. Its amber eyes began to glow brighter, and sometimes Tom could swear he saw sparks of electricity dancing between its claws. The beast's telepathic abilities, dormant for years under Vortex torture, slowly began to reawaken. The first time Tom heard Shadow's voice in his mind, he thought he was going crazy. It happened during one of their quiet moments when they sat together watching the shaft of light that came from the feeding slot above. The voice was deep and resonant, carrying emotions and concepts that human language could barely contain. "Little Pack Brother," the voice said, filled with warmth and wonder, "you have given me back my name. I am Shadow Maw the Star Runners, last of my kind, and I choose you as family." Tom's eyes widened in amazement. "You can talk." I mean, really think talk. The pain givers broke this gift long ago, but your presence heals old wounds. You are not like other humans. Small one, there is something ancient in your blood, something that calls to the wild spaces between stars. From that day forward, their bond deepened beyond anything either species had experienced before. Shadow Maw shared memories of its homeworld, a place of crystal caves and aurora-painted skies, where its people had run free before the Vorthak Empire enslaved them. Tom showed his new brother memories of Earth, the blue-green world his grandfather had described in bedtime stories. The boy learned that Shadow Maw species, the Velthani, had once been partners with early human explorers. Centuries ago, before the great wars that scattered humanity across the galaxy, some humans and Velthani had formed bonds that enhanced both species. The Vorthaks had systematically hunted down these partnerships, viewing them as a threat to their dominance. They fear what we could become together. Shadow Maw explained during one of their mental conversations. One Velthani bonded with one human is worth 100 of their warriors. That is why they separate us, why they make us forget the old ways. Tom felt something awakening in his genetic memory, ancestral knowledge that had been sleeping in his DNA for generations. His great-great-grandmother had been one of the original human colonists who worked alongside alien partners. The ability to form these bonds had been bred out of most humans through centuries of Vorthak oppression, but in Tom it was reasserting itself with startling power. The boy's physical changes accelerated as their mental connection grew stronger. His hair darkened to match Shadow Maw's fur, and his eyes began to show flecks of amber light. His teeth grew sharper, and his fingernails hardened into claws that could scratch metal. Most remarkably, he began to develop Shadow Maw's ability to see in complete darkness. Shadow Maw's own transformation was equally dramatic. The creature's telepathic range expanded until it could sense the emotional states of every human on the ship. Its physical strength returned to levels not seen since its youth, and new abilities began to manifest. The beast discovered it could phase partially through solid matter, becoming ghost-like for brief moments. Together, they began to explore beyond the confines of the feeding pit. Tom was small enough to squeeze through maintenance ducts, while Shadow Maw could phase through barriers that would stop normal creatures. They mapped the ship's lower levels, discovering forgotten storage areas and abandoned sections that the Vorthaks had sealed off years ago. In one such area, they found something that changed everything. Hidden behind a collapsed bulkhead was an old human research station, complete with working computers and scientific equipment. The logs revealed that this section had once been used to study human-alien bonding processes, before the Vorthaks discovered and shut down the project. Tom accessed the research files using knowledge that seemed to flow into his mind from somewhere beyond conscious thought. The data confirmed what Shadow Maw had told him about their species' shared history. More importantly, it contained training protocols designed to help bonded pairs develop their abilities safely. The pain givers thought they destroyed all trace of the old partnerships. Shadow Maw observed as Tom scrolled through the files. But life finds a way to remember what was lost. They began following the training exercises in secret, working together to strengthen their bond and develop new capabilities. Tom learned to project his consciousness into Shadow Maw's mind, experiencing the world through enhanced senses that revealed details invisible to normal human perception. Shadow Maw learned to channel its abilities through their connection, focusing its power with human precision and creativity. The changes in both of them accelerated beyond anything the old research had predicted. Tom's aging process seemed to slow while his development sped up, as if his body was preparing for something extraordinary. Shadow Maw's own cellular structure began to shift, becoming more adaptable and resilient. 3 months after Tom's supposed death, the boy had grown from a frightened 8-year-old into something entirely new. He stood nearly as tall as he had been at the beginning, but carried himself with the confidence of an adult. His movements were fluid and predatory, combining human intelligence with Velthani grace. Shadow Maw was no longer the broken, starving creature the Vorthaks had used to terrorize their prisoners. The beast now radiated power and purpose, its amber eyes burning with the fire of a species that had once ruled the spaces between worlds. Together, they had become something the galaxy had not seen for centuries, a true partnership between human and Velthani. As they sat in their hidden sanctuary, sharing warmth and planning for the future, both knew that their time of hiding was drawing to an end. The ship above was full of suffering humans who deserved better than slavery, and the Vortex who had created this situation would soon face consequences they could never have imagined. "Are you ready, Pack Brother?" Shadowmaw asked as they watched the lights flicker in the research station's computers. Tom smiled, his amber-flecked eyes reflecting the soft glow of the screens. "I've been ready since the day they threw me down here. Time to show them what happens when you try to break something that's meant to be free." Tom Blake stood in the shadows of the maintenance tunnel, watching through a ventilation grate as Vorthack guards herded a new group of human prisoners into the cargo bay. He was 11 years old now, though his body carried the lean muscle and predatory grace of someone much older. His dark hair fell across eyes that glowed with amber light in the dim corridors, and his movements made no sound despite the metal flooring beneath his feet. Shadowmaw crouched beside him. The massive creature's form partially phased so it appeared ghost-like in the darkness. Over the past year, their bond had grown so strong that they often shared thoughts without conscious effort. Tom could feel his pack brother's anger rising as they watched the scene below, the beast's emotions mixing with his own until it became difficult to tell where one ended and the other began. The new prisoners looked exactly like the humans Tom remembered from his childhood before the pit. Tired faces marked by fear and resignation, bodies bent by hard labor and poor nutrition, eyes that had learned to look down rather than meet the gaze of their captors. Among them was an elderly man with white hair who kept his arm protectively around a young woman, probably his daughter. Commander Thek emerged on the platform above the cargo bay, his reptilian features twisted into the same cruel smile Tom remembered from 3 years ago. The Vorthack leader had grown fatter during his time as ship commander, his success in maintaining order among the human slaves earning him favor with the Empire. He wore new armor decorated with symbols of rank and carried a ceremonial weapon that marked his elevated status. New workers, Thek announced to the assembled guards. Fresh blood to replace the weak ones who have died in service to the Empire. These humans come from the mining station at Kepler 7, which has been discontinued. Tom felt a chill run through him as he realized what that meant. The Vorthacks had destroyed another human colony, killing most of the population and taking only the strongest as slaves. These people had lost everything, just as Tom's family had lost everything generations ago when the Vorthacks first conquered human space. The elderly man stepped forward, his voice shaking but determined. "Please, my daughter is sick from the transport. She needs medical attention before she can work." Thek's laugh echoed through the cargo bay like breaking glass. "Your species' weakness is not our concern, old man. She will work or she will die. The choice is simple." "She's all I have left," the man pleaded. "Take me for extra shifts, take my food rations, but please help her." One of the guards raised his energy weapon, but Thek held up a clawed hand. "Wait, this one shows spirit. Perhaps he needs a lesson in proper respect for his betters." Tom watched in horror as 2 guards grabbed the elderly man, while a third activated a pain device, a cruel tool the Vorthacks used to torture prisoners without leaving permanent damage. The man's scream filled the cargo bay as electricity coursed through his body, his daughter crying out for them to stop. Something deep inside Tom snapped, like a chain that had been stretched beyond its breaking point finally giving way. The rage that had been building for 3 years of watching human suffering suddenly erupted with the force of a solar flare. Every muscle in his body tensed, his amber eyes blazing with light that seemed to come from within. Shadowmaw felt the change immediately, the creature's own predatory instincts responding to its pack brother's fury. The beast's form solidified as its phasing ability shut down, replaced by raw physical power that made the air around them crackle with energy. "They have to pay," Tom whispered, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to vibrate through the metal walls. "All of them have to pay for what they've done." "Yes, little brother." Shadowmaw's mental voice was like the growl of an approaching storm. "The time for hiding is over. Let them learn why our peoples once made the Star Hunters flee in terror." Tom felt power flowing through him unlike anything he had experienced before. His enhanced muscles swelled with strength that defied human limitations. His senses expanded until he could hear individual heartbeats throughout the ship, and his mind touched systems and networks with an ease that shocked him. The research station's training protocols had prepared him for this moment, but the reality was far beyond what any simulation could have predicted. The boy placed his hand against the nearest computer terminal, and knowledge flowed into his consciousness like water finding its level. Schematics of the ship's systems, personnel rosters, security protocols, weapons inventories, and communication networks all became part of his mental map. In seconds, he understood the Meridian's hope better than the Vortex, who had controlled it for decades. The ship's defense systems, Tom murmured as he absorbed the data. They're designed to keep enemies out, but not to keep prisoners in. If I reverse the security protocols and lock down the guard stations while opening the detention areas. Shadow Maw's approval flowed through their mental link. You think like a true pack leader, brother. But first, we must ensure the pain givers cannot call for help from their empire. Tom nodded and began accessing the communication systems with his mind, his consciousness diving through data streams and security barriers, as if they were physical obstacles he could simply walk around. The months of practice in the hidden research station had taught him to navigate computer networks with the same ease Shadow Maw moved through solid matter. Working together, they began their campaign of liberation with surgical precision. Tom's human creativity and technical knowledge, combined with Shadow Maw's predatory instincts and supernatural abilities, created a partnership that the ship's designers had never anticipated. They moved through the maintenance tunnels like ghosts, Tom's small size allowing him to reach areas no adult could access, while Shadow Maw phased through barriers that would have stopped normal rescue attempts. Their first target was a communication array. Tom slipped through an access panel barely large enough for his enhanced body, while Shadow Maw kept watch from the shadows. The room beyond was filled with complex equipment that hummed with the power of interstellar transmissions, but to Tom's enhanced perception it might as well have been a simple children's toy. He placed both hands on the main console and let his consciousness merge with the ship's communication network. Data flowed both ways, Tom downloading information about Vorhack fleet movements and patrol schedules while simultaneously uploading viruses and logic bombs that would cripple their ability to call for reinforcements. The sabotage was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than destroying equipment outright, which would be noticed immediately, Tom programmed it to appear functional while actually broadcasting nothing but background radiation. Any distress calls would be lost in the cosmic noise between stars, leaving the Meridian's hope effectively isolated. Their next objective was a security system that controlled access to the detention areas and guard stations. This required a more delicate touch, as Tom needed to reverse the protocols without triggering automatic alarms. He found the central security node in a heavily shielded room 3 levels above the cargo bay, accessible only through a narrow maintenance shaft that led directly over the main guard post. As Tom worked to reprogram the security system, Shadow Maw's enhanced senses detected movement in the corridor below. A patrol of 4 Vorhack guards was making routine rounds, their heavy footsteps echoing through the metal halls. The creature's tactical mind immediately began calculating attack vectors and escape routes, but Tom placed a calming hand on its flank. "Not yet, brother," he whispered. "Let them think they're still in control for a little while longer." The security reprogramming took nearly an hour, but when Tom finished, he had effectively given himself master access to every door, camera, and sensor on the ship. More importantly, he had programmed the system to gradually shift control from the Vorhack command center to his hidden location in the research station. By morning, the aliens would find themselves locked out of their own ship. With the technical preparation complete, Tom and Shadow Maw began the more dangerous phase of their plan. They needed to make contact with the human prisoners and begin organizing a resistance network. This meant moving through areas of the ship where they might be discovered, but their enhanced abilities made detection almost impossible. Tom could phase partially through walls by borrowing Shadow Maw's ability through their mental link, while the creature could become nearly invisible by bending light around its form. Together, they moved through the ship like living shadows, observing guard rotations and identifying key targets for their eventual uprising. They found the elderly man from the cargo bay in the medical section, his body still recovering from the torture session. His daughter sat beside him, her own illness having worsened from stress and poor conditions. Tom felt his anger flare again at the sight of their suffering, but he forced himself to remain focused on the larger plan. Using the ship's internal communication system, Tom began sending coded messages to human workers throughout the vessel. The messages appeared to be routine maintenance notifications, but hidden within the technical language were instructions for a coordinated rebellion. Those who understood the code were told to prepare for action and watched for a signal that would come when the time was right. The response surprised him. Despite years of oppression, the human spirit had not been completely broken. Workers throughout the ship began acknowledging the coded messages, some adding their own suggestions for targets and tactics. Tom realized that many had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. They just needed someone to take the first step. As the ship entered its night cycle, Tom and Shadowmore returned to their hidden sanctuary in the research station. The boy sat before the bank of monitors that now displayed feeds from cameras throughout the vessel, his amber eyes reflecting the glow of the screens as he watched Vorthack guards, making their rounds in blissful ignorance of what was coming. Tomorrow, he said aloud, his voice carrying the authority of someone far older than his 11 years. Tomorrow we show them what happens when you try to cage something that was born to be free. Shadowmaw's mental voice carried the satisfaction of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. The hunt begins at last, Pack Brother. And when it ends, the stars themselves will remember what we have done. The first Vorthack guard died, without making a sound. Tom dropped from the ceiling ventilation shaft like a falling shadow, his enhanced muscles propelling him downward with lethal precision. His hardened fingernails, now grown into proper claws, pierced the guard's throat before the alien could even register the attack. The reptilian warrior collapsed in a pool of green blood, his weapon clattering uselessly to the metal floor. Shadowmaw materialized from the darkness beside the body, the creature's massive form becoming solid as it emerged from its phased state. The beast sniffed the air with satisfaction, amber eyes gleaming with predatory pleasure. This was what they had both been born for, what centuries of evolution had designed them to do. One down, Tom whispered as he cleaned his claws on the dead guard's uniform. 47 to go. 3 weeks had passed since Tom began his campaign of silent warfare against the Vorthack oppressors. Each night, guards would disappear from their posts, found later in maintenance shafts or storage compartments with wounds that defied explanation. The remaining Vorthacks had grown paranoid and jumpy, but they attributed the deaths to equipment accidents or internal conflicts among their own ranks. Commander Thek had tripled the security patrols and instituted a buddy system where no guard walked alone, but these measures only made Tom's job easier. Larger groups moved more slowly and made more noise, giving him and Shadowmaw multiple targets in a single location. The enhanced senses and supernatural abilities they had developed made them nearly impossible to detect, even by Vorthack technology. Tom had grown again during these weeks of hunting. Now 14 years old in appearance, though only 11 in actual time, he stood nearly 6 feet tall with the lean build of a natural predator. His dark hair had developed silver streaks that matched Shadowmaw's markings, and his amber eyes burned with inner fire that could be seen even in normal lighting. Most remarkably, he had begun to develop the ability to phase through solid matter without Shadowmaw's direct assistance. The human resistance network had also grown stronger under Tom's guidance. Using the ship's communication systems, he coordinated small acts of sabotage that crippled Vorthack equipment and disrupted their routines. Mining drills would malfunction at critical moments, life support systems would develop mysterious glitches in guard quarters, and food replicators would produce inedible sludge instead of proper rations. The elderly man Tom had seen tortured in the cargo bay had become one of his most valuable allies. David Chun, as Tom learned his name, had been a communications engineer before the Vorthacks destroyed his colony. His daughter Marie was slowly recovering under the care of human medics, who had gained access to better medical supplies through Tom's redistribution of ship resources. The guards are getting desperate, David reported during one of their secret meetings in the abandoned research station. They're starting to turn on each other, accusing fellow guards of being responsible for the disappearances. Tom nodded as he studied the tactical displays on the monitors around them. Good. Fear makes them sloppy, and sloppy enemies make mistakes. What about the weapons storage? 3 of our people have gained access to the armory maintenance schedule. When you give the signal, they can disable the security locks and distribute energy weapons to the resistance cells. Marie spoke up from where she sat beside her father, her health much improved since Tom had ensured she received proper medical treatment. The workers in Section 7 want to know when we're going to strike openly. They're tired of hiding and ready to fight. Tom felt Shadowmaw's presence in his mind, the creature sharing tactical assessments and battle plans with the speed of thought. Their mental connection had evolved to the point where they could coordinate complex operations without speaking, each anticipating the other's actions with perfect precision. "Soon," Tom replied. "But first we need to deal with their ace in the hole." Commander Thek has been in contact with a Vorthak battle cruiser that's scheduled to arrive next month. If we don't take control of the ship before then, we'll be facing professional soldiers instead of just guards. The thought of reinforcements arriving had been weighing heavily on Tom's mind. His sabotage of the communication systems had prevented Thek from calling for immediate help, but scheduled check-ins were harder to disrupt without raising suspicions. The commander had been forced to send increasingly creative excuses for why his reports were delayed, but eventually the Vorthak High Command would investigate. David pulled up a schematic of the ship's command center on one of the research station's displays. The problem is getting to Thek himself. He's surrounded by his best guards and never leaves the protected areas of the ship. Even with your abilities, it would be almost impossible to reach him. Tom studied the layout with enhanced perception, his mind automatically calculating approach vectors and escape routes. The command center was indeed heavily fortified, with multiple layers of security and redundant defense systems. But as he analyzed the data, a different plan began to form in his thoughts. "We don't need to go to him," Tom said slowly. "We just need to make him come to us." Shadow Maw's mental voice carried curiosity and approval. "You have a plan, Pack Brother?" "I do. But first, we need to send a message that will get the commander's attention. Something he can't ignore or explain away." That night, Tom and Shadow Maw struck their most daring blow yet. Instead of targeting individual guards, they hit the main power distribution center that supplied energy to the Vorthak quarters. Working together with perfect coordination, Tom disabled the security systems while Shadow Maw used its phasing ability to reach components that should have been inaccessible. The sabotage was surgical in its precision. Rather than causing an explosion or obvious damage, Tom programmed the power grid to develop cascading failures that would leave the aliens in darkness while maintaining full power to human sections of the ship. The psychological impact was devastating as Vorthak warriors found themselves stumbling through corridors lit only by emergency lighting. But the real message came in the form of graffiti that appeared on every monitor in the ship's command center. Using his access to the computer systems, Tom displayed a simple phrase in both human and Vorthak languages. "The child you fed to your beast has grown teeth." Commander Thek stared at the words with growing horror, his reptilian features twisting in disbelief. The implications were impossible to accept, yet the evidence was mounting that something connected to human boy he had sacrificed years ago was behind the recent troubles. "Find me that pit," Thek snarled at his aide Grix. "I want to see the bones of that human whelp with my own eyes." When the security team reached the feeding pit, they found it empty except for old refuse and the rusted remains of Shadow Maw's original cage. There was no sign of human remains, no evidence that any sacrifice had ever taken place. More disturbing were the modifications that had been made to the space. Hidden passages and concealed entrances that suggested long-term habitation. "The beast," one of the guards whispered. "Where's the sacred Ravenclaw?" The truth was worse than anything they could have imagined. Not only had their prisoner survived, but he had somehow tamed or allied with their most feared weapon. The creature they had used to terrorize humans for decades was now working against them, turned into an instrument of vengeance by the very child they had tried to destroy. Tom watched the Vorthak's growing panic through hidden cameras he had placed throughout the ship. Their fear was almost tangible, radiating through the corridors like a physical presence. These beings who had lorded over humanity with such arrogance were discovering what it felt like to be hunted by something they couldn't understand or control. The final phase of his plan began 3 days later when Tom made his first open appearance since being thrown into the pit. He emerged from a maintenance hatch in the main corridor during shift change, when the maximum number of Vorthaks would see him. His transformed appearance sent shockwaves through the alien ranks as word spread that the dead human child had returned. Tom stood in the center of the corridor, no longer attempting to hide his enhanced nature. His amber eyes blazed with inner light, his claws gleamed like polished metal, and when he smiled, his sharpened teeth promised violence to come. Most unnervingly of all, he showed no fear as dozens of energy weapons were pointed in his direction. "Hello, Commander Thek." Tom's voice carried clearly through the ship's communication system, broadcast to every speaker and monitor aboard the vessel. "I believe you remember me. I'm the child you sacrificed to your beast 3 years ago." The guards opened fire, but Tom was no longer where their weapons were aimed. He moved with inhuman speed and grace, phasing through walls and appearing behind his attackers with lethal precision. In seconds, half the security team lay dead or dying, their blood painting abstract patterns on the metal walls. Shadow Maw emerged from the shadows like a nightmare-given form, the creature's massive bulk filling the corridor as it padded toward the surviving guards. The beast's amber eyes reflected Tom's own inner fire, and when it spoke to the ship speakers, its mental voice carried the weight of ancient power. The Pack Brothers kept his promise. Shadow Maw's words echoed through every section of the vessel. The time of hiding is over. Now comes the time of reckoning. The remaining guards fled in terror, their disciplined formations dissolving into panic retreat. Throughout the ship, human workers began emerging from their quarters as the resistance cells activated according to Tom's predetermined signal. Years of oppressed rage finally found its outlet as the enslaved rose against their captors. Tom stood in the blood-stained corridor with Shadow Maw beside him, both of them transformed by their shared bond into something beyond what either species had been alone. The boy who had been thrown to the beast as a helpless sacrifice now commanded powers that made the Vorthack's weapons seem like toys. "Let them run," Tom said as he watched the fleeing guards disappear around distant corners. "There's nowhere on this ship they can hide from us. And soon, there will be nowhere in the galaxy where beings like them can prey on those they consider weak." The hunt had begun in earnest, and neither Tom nor Shadow Maw intended to leave any of their enemies alive to threaten humanity again. The corridors of the Meridian's Hope had become a battlefield painted in green and red. Tom Blake moved through the chaos like a force of nature, his 16-year-old body now standing nearly 7 feet tall with muscles that rippled with power beyond human limits. His amber eyes blazed with inner fire as he led the human uprising to the ship's main levels, Shadow Maw flowing beside him like a living shadow made of claws and fangs. 3 days had passed since the open rebellion began, and the Vorthack forces were crumbling under pressure they had never imagined possible. Their energy weapons, so effective against normal humans, seemed almost useless against Tom's enhanced abilities. He could phase through their defensive barriers, predict their movements through his connection with Shadow Maw, and strike with speed that made their reaction time seem glacial. Behind them came waves of liberated humans, no longer the broken slaves who had shuffled through these same corridors in defeat. David Chun led one group armed with captured Vorthack weapons, his engineering knowledge helping them turn the aliens' own technology against them. Marie fought beside her father, her earlier sickness replaced by the fierce determination of someone who had found something worth fighting for. The human resistance had grown beyond Tom's most optimistic projections. Workers who had seemed completely beaten down by years of oppression revealed hidden reserves of courage and skill when given proper leadership and hope. They knew every maintenance tunnel, every hidden passage, every weakness in the ship's design that their captors had never bothered to secure. Tom paused at a junction where 3 corridors met, his enhanced senses detecting movement in all directions. Shadow Maw's mental voice flowed through their shared consciousness, providing tactical information that no human commander could have accessed. The creature could sense the emotional states of every being on the ship, tracking fear and aggression like a predator following scent trails. 12 guards in the left passage. Shadow Maw reported through their mental link. 23 in the central route, but they are preparing an ambush with heavy weapons. The right path leads to the command center, but Commander Thek has sealed the blast doors and activated the automated defense systems. Tom smiled, his sharpened teeth gleaming in the flickering emergency lighting. Then we go through all 3 at once. Are you ready to show them what happens when predators work together? Always, Pack Brother. Let us remind these scaleskins why their ancestors learned to fear the darkness between stars. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration of evolved human potential unleashed. Tom split his consciousness, sending part of himself into the ship's computer networks while maintaining physical control of his transformed body. Through the electronic systems, he disabled life support in the left corridor, forcing the Vorthack guards to retreat toward the central passage where human resistance fighters waited in ambush. Meanwhile, his physical form phased through the walls of the right corridor, appearing behind the automated defense turrets that guarded the approach to the command center. His claws, now harder than the strongest metal, sliced through armor plating and circuitry with equal ease. The weapons that should have torn him apart instead sparked and died under his touch. Shadow Maw took the central route, moving like liquid death through spaces too small for its massive frame. The creature's ability to phase through matter had evolved to the point where it could selectively solidify parts of its body, allowing claws and fangs to remain corporeal while the rest became untouchable. Vorhack energy beams passed harmlessly through its ghostly form, while its physical attacks struck with devastating force. The aliens' disciplined formations collapsed within minutes. These warriors who had conquered dozens of species found themselves facing something their training had never prepared them for. Tom and Shadow Maw fought with perfect coordination, each covering the other's attacks, while creating openings for human fighters to exploit. Commander Thek watched the slaughter through command center security feeds, his reptilian features twisted in disbelief and growing terror. The small human child he had thrown to his pet beast years ago had become something that defied every law of biology and physics he understood. More disturbing was how the creature he had used to terrorize prisoners now served this transformed human with absolute loyalty. "Sir," his aide Grix reported with a trembling voice, "the blast doors are failing. Something is overriding our security protocols from within the ship's computer core." Thek's clawed hands gripped his command chair until the metal groaned under the pressure. "Impossible. Those systems are completely isolated from the general network. No one could access them without direct physical contact with the main processing unit. The human is not operating under normal limitations." Grix observed as they watched Tom phase through supposedly solid barriers on the security monitors. "Perhaps he has found ways to interact with our technology that we never anticipated." The truth was even more remarkable than the Vort hacks realized. Tom's consciousness had evolved to the point where he could interface directly with electronic systems through quantum-level manipulation of electromagnetic fields. His bond with Shadow Maw had unlocked genetic potential that had been dormant in human DNA for millennia, abilities that predated the technologies both species currently used. The command center's main doors began to glow with heat as something on the other side applied tremendous force to the reinforced barriers. Thek drew his personal weapon, a ceremonial plasma rifle decorated with the symbols of his rank and family lineage. Around him, his remaining guards took defensive positions behind equipment that suddenly seemed inadequate against the force approaching them. The doors exploded inward with the sound of rending metal, and Tom Blake stepped through the smoking wreckage like an avatar of human vengeance. His transformation was complete now, no longer recognizably the small boy who had been sacrificed years ago. He stood tall and confident, his amber eyes blazing with power that made the air around him crackle with energy. Shadow Maw flowed through the destroyed entrance beside him, the creature's massive form filling the space with predatory grace. The beast's telepathic abilities had grown so strong that every Vorthack in the room could feel its emotions directly, waves of satisfied hunger and ancient rage that spoke of species-level grudges spanning geological time. "Commander Thek," Tom's voice carried harmonics that seemed to vibrate through the metal structure of the ship itself. "We meet again, though I suspect you remember me better as the helpless child you fed to your pet." Thek raised his plasma rifle with hands that shook despite his efforts to maintain composure. "You are an abomination, a violation of natural law. The Empire will hunt you and your kind to extinction for this rebellion." Tom laughed, the sound carrying genuine amusement rather than mockery. "Your empire exists because species like mine forgot what we were capable of when we worked together. But memories can be recovered, Commander. Evolution can be accelerated, and old partnerships can be renewed." The Vorthack guards opened fire with everything they had, energy beams and projectile weapons filling the command center with deadly light and sound. But Tom was no longer entirely physical. His consciousness spread across multiple dimensions, while his body existed in a state somewhere between matter and energy. The attacks passed through him harmlessly while he closed the distance to his enemies with impossible speed. What followed was not a battle, but an execution. Tom moved through the guards like a force of nature, his claws and enhanced strength making their armor and weapons useless. But he was not mindlessly violent. Each strike calculated to disable rather than kill when possible. These beings had committed terrible crimes. But Tom's human compassion tempered his newfound predatory instincts. Shadow Maw dealt with the remaining guards while Tom approached Commander Thek, who had backed against the main command console with his weapon trained on the approaching figure. The Vordak commander's yellow eyes showed the desperate courage of a cornered predator, but also something else that might have been respect. "Do it quickly," Thek said, his voice steady despite the fear radiating from his scaled hide. "I will not beg for mercy from prey that learned to bite back." Tom stopped just beyond the range of Thek's weapon, tilting his head in a gesture that mirrored Shadow Maw's curious mannerisms. "I'm not going to kill you, Commander. That would be too simple, and it wouldn't serve my people's needs." "Then what do you want, monster?" "I want you to carry a message back to your empire," Tom replied as he gestured toward the command center's communication array. "I want them to know that humanity remembers what it was before you broke us. And we're going to remind every species in the galaxy why humans and our partners once ruled the spaces between worlds." Tom placed his hand on the main communication console, his consciousness merging with the ship's long-range transmitters. Through quantum manipulation and enhanced electromagnetic control, he boosted the signal strength far beyond normal operational parameters. His message would reach every Vordak facility within 50 light years, carried by subspace frequencies that would be impossible to block or intercept. "This is Tom Blake of the Meridian's Hope." His voice echoed through Vordak space with the authority of someone who becomes something entirely new. "We are no longer your slaves. We are no longer your prey. We are the children of Earth and the partners of species you thought you had exterminated. We are coming home, and we are bringing friends." The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in silence broken only by the hum of damaged equipment and the soft sound of Shadow Maw's breathing. Tom looked around at the humans who had fought their way to this moment, seeing in their faces the same transformation that had occurred within himself. They were no longer the broken slaves who had shuffled through corridors in defeat. They had become something new, something that carried the potential for humanity to reclaim its place among the stars. The bond between Tom and Shadow Maw had shown them what was possible when different species worked together as true partners rather than master and servant. Set course for human space, Tom commanded as he took his place at the command station. "It's time to go home and show our people what we've learned." The Meridian's Hope turned toward the distant stars that marked the boundaries of human territory, its holds filled with liberated slaves who carried within them the seeds of a new age. Behind them, Commander Thek and surviving Vortaks huddled in their damaged ship, already composing reports that their superiors would dismiss as impossible until it was far too late. In the depths of space, evolution had taken a sudden leap forward, and the galaxy would never be the same.